You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Koku. And tonight we are on the second to last night of KWAZ, in the night of Kuumba, which looks like creativity. And so, in the spirit of looking at creativity, I wanted to read this paper that touches on creating and imagining Black futures through Afrofuturism, right? So this shows we're going to read a chapter of a book. The book is called #Identity. And we're going to read the subtitle of the book is #In Race, Gender, Sexuality, and Nation. And so we're going to read this chapter from this book, #Identity, that discusses what Black future looks like through the lens of Afrofuturism. So for those who don't know, Afrofuturism is a cultural aesthetic that combines science fiction, history, and fantasy to explore the African experience, or the African American experience, and aims to connect those from the Black diaspora with their forgotten African ancestry. And so I think a night like this, one of the principles of KWAZ being creativity, I think it's a good night to kind of shed light on, you know, this movement, this Afrofuturist movement. If you're not familiar with it, let me show you this video that hopefully sheds some more light.
When people envision the future in art, most often it's seen through a white lens. Only 8% of the 100 top-grossing sci-fi and fantasy films featured a protagonist of color. Half the time, the protagonist was Will Smith. But we're not all white or Will Smith. The future looks different if you look at it through the lens of Black experiences. That's why we have this thing called Afrofuturism. The term was coined by culture critic Mark Derry in 1994 to point out the lack of Black writers and Black stories in science fiction. But this kind of art existed long before the term Afrofuturism did. Just look at music. Jazz musician Sun Ra is probably one of the most recognizable Afrofuturists. He lays out an Afrofuturistic design in his 1973 album Space is the Place, which you're listening to now, and also became a film. The key is that his future was Afrocentric, linking his future self to ancient forebears in Egypt. These ideas were more politically direct and a lot more funky in George Clinton's parliament during 1975. In Mothership Connection, he connects the struggle of civil rights and we shall overcome to a positive future.
You have overcome, for I am here.
He not only references an old song from the Underground Railroad to escape slavery, but he slipped the desperate history into a positive, futuristic ride on his spaceship as evidence the struggle is over and we've won. So of course everybody wants to get on. And people did get on.
Hell yeah.
Or at least some 90s hip-hop heavyweights did. But Afrofuturism also critiques the way the future looks today, like Andre 3000 did on his AT Aliens verse.
If not, I wait because the future of the world depends on if or if not the child race gonna have that syndrome. I will know to beat the odds regardless of its skin tone.
He wants his unborn kid to get the future they want. not the one society created for them because of race. And that's why he takes pride in the difference.
And get gone. The alienators, 'cause we different. Keep your hand to the sky. Like sounds of blackness when I practice what I preach and don't lie.
And empowers Black people to fight to get what's ours.
I be the baker and the maker of the piece of my pie. Now break
Because that's the thing about Afrofuturism. It's rooted in Black people having a better future for ourselves on our terms, like Janelle Monáe does in Queens. This is a common thread of Afrofuturism. To overcome the current way society remains unequal, there needs to be futures where those problems are solved. Afrofuturism shows us what that looks like. It looks like hope.
Okay, and that's Afrofuturism. But and as you can see in this book, you know, this chapter comes from a book that's discussing, you know, hashtag identity, you know, hashtagging race, gender, sexuality, and nation. So you know already what could be here, right? You know what could pop up. So don't be surprised if it does. The idea here is really just to shed light on the fact that we're looking at this principle of KWAZ. We're looking at the sixth principle of KWAZ tonight, which is to do always as much as we can in the way we can in order to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than we inherited it. Kwamba means creativity, and so we want to make sure that we touch on being creative. And you know, as we go forward in this, you know, as we're on the eve of this new year, according to the Romans, right? That's something I'd like to see more of. You know, I talked about this a little bit last night in the last episode, where, you know, we tend to push our children, for instance, into these limited fields, you know, medicine, engineering, law, you know, maybe nursing, maybe teaching, you know, but there's a lot of different things that we can do. The problem is a lot of the other fields, in fact, a lot of fields, period, but a lot of these other fields I'm thinking about, you know, a lot of times there's these white gatekeepers. And so you don't get to see how people thrive that much. You're seeing more of it now, but a lot of times it's these intersectional Black folks who are getting put on. You know, one thought I had a while ago, I'm not saying it now to bring it back up, that's something I want to do, but a thought I had was to do audio plays. Get Black creatives, playwrights who are not getting any burn out here in society, and, you know, just sit them down and we just create these audio plays. So we put out these audio plays. Maybe they go out as a series of episodes or what have you. And if you're interested in doing this, by all means, come on board with KWAZ Radio and you know, finish this thought. But we have a lot of people out here who are writers who you know, will probably never see any burn from the dominant society in terms of being able to put out their works that's steeped in Blackness. And, you know, that's a way that we can do stuff. I've seen it done in certain areas of Brooklyn. These people put out their stage plays in the park in the summertime. Why can't we do that? You know, so when we talk about being creative or creativity in this new year, I'd like to see more of our people being really creative. You know, there's a saying that goes that representation matters, and it does. So when I tune into a movie or a TV show or something like that, I'd like it to be something that's dropping some gems, that's uplifting, and I'd like it to be something that I could see myself or people like me in the shows, that we're not cowardly and all this old stuff that they tend to, you know, make us in their shows. And one of the things that video I played a second ago mentions is, like, a lot of times in these futures, these dystopian societies, if you watch closely at these shows and movies, black folks are presumed dead for the most part. And who's not dead is subservient. But if we write our own and create our own, you know, our own media, right, we won't have to have characters that are like that, you see. And so that's something I want our folks to look at. If you look at, you know, like a popular Afrofuturism or Afrofuturist author is like Octavia Butler. You know what I'm saying? We could do good work and show our people in good ways, right? And that's something that we should be working on actively in the near future. So that's Kuumba, creativity, and that's the things I'd like to see us do going forward. Shout out to those folks who are here with me live today. Doesn't seem like as many, but I appreciate each and every one of you. Before I continue with the reading, I just want to remind you of the other shows on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed. So, let's get into tonight's reading. Again, we're reading Creating and Imagining Black Futures through Afrofuturism. This is a part of the sixth principle of KWAZ, which is Kuumba. The author here is GRACE GIPSON. This is from the book titled Hashtag Identity, subtitle Hashtagging Race, Gender, Sexuality, and Nation. Something's not right. Hold on a second. Okay. So, the African diaspora has historically been deeply invested in the future, from Sunrise use of Egyptian iconography to Imagine leaving Oakland, California for a future destination in Saturn, to musical artists like Parliament and Outkast taking us on the mothership experience, to writers and scholars Octavia Butler, Nala Hopkinson, Walida Imarisha, and Codwo Eshun, creating academic bridges from Africa to America to space. Many of the conversations among key figures in Afrofuturism have taken place in real time on the digital spaces of social media. Over the past 5 years, social media has fueled a palpable hunger and desire among African diasporic internet users to know more about Afrofuturism as a lens to better understand our lives and possibilities beyond our present circumstances. Twitter in particular introduces a space for contemporary digital commentary to create Afrofuturistic archival platforms and mechanisms for studying objects or for developing new spaces and communities of learning. Afrofuturist writer and artist Tasha Womack states, Afrofuturism is an intersection of imagination, technology, the future, and liberation. The intersection that Womack describes is not solely the domain of artists, musicians, authors, and scholars in the 2010s. With digital technologies, numerous people are identifying as Afrofuturists and are using Afrofuturist ideas and concepts to educate, share stories, fight oppression, and help build communities in need. If you go back, several episodes back, I was talking about this. We need the writers. We need the writers talking about what a hopeful future looks like, talking about what it looks like, right, to have a black nation, a powerful black nation. So we need writers who are in this liberation struggle as well. As a matter of fact, there used to be this show called 24 I used to be into years ago. Me and my friends were. And in 24, the show 24, for a couple of seasons there, they ended up having a black president in 24. As a matter of fact, on two different occasions, right, for a few years, it was actually, I believe there was two black presidents on the show. And a lot of people believe that, and 24 was a big hit. The star was a white guy, Kiefer Sutherland. And the black president was the Allstate guy, the guy with the deep voice. But there was a lot of talk and belief that 24 showing a black president on this hit TV show and the character being a good character, like, well acted, etc. A lot of people believe that is what really paved the way for Obama to become president. You can go back and look that up, right? So what I'm getting at is that in our writing, in what we portray, what we put on DVDs and television shows and what movies we make and animations, you guys can go right now and get a free software called Blender. And you can make your own, if you sit down and put in the time, you can make your own CG TV shows, your CG shorts, etc. And it could be all black characters to your liking. And that's the thing we also need. That's a part of the propaganda, right? The positive propaganda that works on our people, our children who are coming up to be the next thing, in our black future. To be the bright spots in our black future. And so the arts are super important. You could sit and talk politics all day, but it's the arts that means something. It's that creativity that we have in us that means something. Now, if we channel it and put the right messaging behind it, we'll have something that goes along with this education that we keep talking about, right? That contributes to this future that we want to see. To continue. While some may argue that Afrofuturism is a narrow field or genre, social media networks such as Twitter are engaging with Afrofuturism and widening its scope. Twitter offers millions of users many opportunities to learn and engage with Afrofuturism from several perspectives, and on the platform, users can encounter Afrofuturism numerous times within a span of minutes. This essay argues that academics, artists, and social activists are using Twitter to raise awareness about and expand the horizons of Afrofuturism. Thus, through this essay, as a matter of fact, if you're on Twitter and you follow me on Twitter, tag me, or at me, I should say, in some Afrofuturism artwork, or posts about books or television shows. Just at me in whatever you come across, whatever you like, right? So through this essay, I suggest the following modes of analysis. 1, the idea of flame keeping through the preservation, continuation, and reclamation of African diasporic knowledge. 2, through exploring the relationship between Afrofuturist arts and scholarship. And 3, through broadening the geographical boundaries of the Afrofuturism movement to accomplish a creative engagement with the various entry points of Afrofuturism and Twitter as a social media platform. A lot of you don't know I'm actually working on an Afrofuturism graphic novel. This essay uses tweets as its primary object of analysis. For Afrofuturist practitioners, theorists, and teachers, Twitter serves more than entertainment and social purpose. It also facilitates community organization and the education of others. Afrofuturists use Twitter as a time machine to bring the past into the present and to hail possible future scholars who will ensure the future of Afrofuturism. An uncanny and positive temporality and spatiality operates in these tweets, which, for example, puts 19th century African American writers such as Sojourner Truth and W.E.B. Du Bois and scholars at the University of Massachusetts Amherst in conversation with black college-age millennials in Nigeria. Thus, Afrofuturism on Twitter is digitally omnipresent and is not confined to a specific location or time. Additionally, many tweets using the hashtag Afrofuturism tag explicitly seek to open up new conversations and projects that can take place in real-world sites such as classrooms, local community centers, or one's private reading space. I argue that every tweet that uses the hashtag Afrofuturism in a meaningful way should be considered a new addition to the body of Afrofuturist scholarship. After analyzing a number of Afrofuturism tweets, I will explain how Afrofuturism serves as a form of digital blackness, a method of rethinking blackness in the age of digital technology. Digital blackness. So this brings us to this section called Flame Keeping, Preservation and Continuation of Afrofuturist Knowledge. Afrofuturism has always been concerned with creatively telling the histories of those from the African diaspora while also designing new narratives. Both novices and longtime participants in Afrofuturism also seek to reclaim and preserve the genre's existing texts and voices. I use the term flame keeping to describe these acts of preserving the existing cultural productions and body of knowledge of Afrofuturism and build upon Afrofuturism's established foundations. The following case illustrates how one scholar used Twitter to perform flame keeping. The tweet from @Melanie Cole McCoy, figure 5.1, is an introduction to and starter kit for newcomers to the field of Afrofuturism. The photo that McCoy has posted shows two piles of Afrofuturist books. Several genres are represented: novels, autobiographies, edited collections, scholarly monographs, and comic books. Tasha Womack's landmark book, Afrofuturism, The World of Black Sci-Fi and Fantasy Culture, lies atop. I think I have that book in a PDF. If you want it, join the Discord. Let me post the Discord link for you guys. Chat room. Remember, these links last for 24 hours. So it's best that you hop on it now. If you're listening to the playback, you can always just reach out to me in the comment section or what have you, asking me to join. Okay? All right. Deborah E. Whaley's Black Women in Sequence, re-inking comics, graphic novels, and anime, and beneath Greg Tate's 1992 essay, Flyboy in the Buttermilk, Essays on Contemporary America. The majority of the books are authored by Black science fiction writer Octavia E. Butler. If you guys don't know, there's a really good Octavia Butler. Is that an Octavia Butler story? I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty sure it's an Octavia Butler story. If not, it's based on the idea of Octavia Butler that Spike Lee did on Netflix. I forgot the name of it now. If you know the name in the comment section, post it for me. Pretty decent show. It's about some kids traveling through time. The majority of the books are authored by black science fiction writer Octavia E. Butler. McCoy also includes less canonically Afrofuturist texts such as Sojourner Truth 1850, The Narrative of Sojourner Truth, and through this inclusion, McCoy expands the boundaries of Afrofuturism, indicating that historical black texts can be seen as documents of how thinkers from different eras envision black future. I just want to go back and show you guys who are watching live. This is the figure. This was the tweet. This is the introductory or starter kit of texts for newcomers to the field of Afrofuturism. You can see there's a stack of Octavia Butler. I mean, most of it is Octavia. Kindred is one of them. Wild Seed is another. There's a bunch. There's also a book called Black Comics, Black Women in Sequins, as we talked about in the text. And if I were you guys and you're into this idea, even, you could be full-grown adults. You're into this idea, or you like the idea of Afrofuturism, by all means, go and order those books today. Moving on. These texts are aimed at different demographics and employ diverse methods of and approaches to Afrofuturism. McCoy's tweet is important because it shows that Afrofuturism is not limited to one type of reader or media user and is not defined by one methodology. McCoy's proposed text could easily be used as the basis for a syllabus of a college course on Afrofuturism. It could also just as easily be used by a non-academic reader who simply wishes to begin hearing or to know more about Afrofuturism. Additionally, people who take up McCoy's invitation to read these texts will be able to create an array of interpretations and definitions of what Afrofuturism means. McCoy's set of books casts a wide net that encourages users to understand how they might fit into Afrofuturism. Perhaps they will become students or theorists of Afrofuturism as a scholarly field. Perhaps they will become fans of Afrofuturism as a popular subculture. Perhaps they will become Afrofuturist artists or novelists or nonfiction writers or comic book illustrators and envision their own works appearing on a shelf of Afrofuturist texts one day. This is what you want to get into. There's all kind of facets of, building a nation. And in a nation, you're going to need all sorts of products, all sorts of items, all sorts of reinforcing things to maintain the nation. And so you want people who are looking ahead, who are practicing Sankova, taking things from the past, the aspirations of our ancestors, and pushing it forward into some form of realization in the future. This is an area where I hope to do my part as well. And I hope you will do, your part, when the time comes. And the best time is now. An additional reason McCoy's tweet is important because it demonstrates how Afrofuturism incorporates numerous academic disciplines. While her list could potentially be taken up as a canon, McCoy's diversity of text reflects Afrofuturism's resistance to canonicity. This resistance can be viewed through the amalgamation of different genres and disciplines versus one central theme on the one discipline to define what Afrofuturism is. However, image in figure 5.1 also potentially demonstrates Octavia Butler's work as primary text of Afrofuturism and the readings on the right as secondary. Nevertheless, this formula could be contested due to placing a certain hierarchy on Butler's body of work. How many of you have read an Octavia Butler novel? And which one is your favorite? Which Octavia Butler book is your favorite? In this tweet, I consider McCoy to be doing the work of a digital curator. She selects an exemplary group of Afrofuturist works and displays it to both novices and initiates. I also interpret McCoy's tweet as itself a work of Afrofuturism. By speaking to Twitter's millennial user base, McCoy brings the history of Afrofuturism into the present, calling forth the next generation of Afrofuturists and facilitating the field's continuation and expansion by those new contributors. As a matter of fact, guys who are listening, what are, besides Octavia Butler, again, list, name which is your favorite book or favorite books from Octavia Butler. If there's a favorite piece of artwork or music that's considered Afrofuturist, put that down too. Let's teach each other about what's out there, right? So let's not just limit it to books. Let's, is there a movie? Is there something on the continent going down that we should know about that falls under Afrofuturism? Let us know. Drop that in the comment section. Let newcomers, and people who hear this podcast, teach them something. Teach me something as well. Several historical moments coincide in McCoy's list. Truth's narrative was published in the mid-19th century. Butler's novels were published in the late 20th century. And Tate's and Womack's books appeared in the early 21st century. At the same time, another set of 21st century temporalities speak to creative social justice practices in the past, present, and future through Walida Mauritia and Adrienne Marie Brown's edited short story and essay collection titled Octavia's Brood, Science Fiction Stories from Social Justice Movements, The Future of a Race and Gender in Comics through Deborah Whaley's Black Women in Sequence, Re-inking Comics, Graphic Novels, and Anime, and Sheena Howard and Ronald L. Jackson II's Black Comics, Politics of Race and Representation. I intend to get these books as well. After the show, I might just go on Amazon and order what I can. Right? Each of the texts embodies the future in some fashion and describes the evolution of Afrofuturist work. For example, Mauritia and Brown's Octavia's Brood speaks to an overall theme of visionary fiction. That is, being applied not only to the early literary works, i.e. Octavia Butler and Samuel Delany of Afrofuturism, but also to the way social justice and community organizing play a role in forecasting Black futures. The collection also offers another entry point of engagement into Afrofuturism. In Black Women in Sequence, Whaley creates a platform to recognize and acknowledge the existence of numerous female characters and creators, past and present, of the African diaspora within the anime and comic book graphic novel field. This should be a dope book. I don't have it yet, but you guys should consider getting it. Sounds like a good coffee table type book to have, and good to have around our children as inspiration. Much like how those of the African diaspora, more specifically women, have been marginalized and seen as non-existent within the future, Whaley offers creative examples that dispel this myth. And Howard and Jackson's Black Comics, similar to Whaley's collection, engages with comics, graphic novels, and manga from the Black perspective and their significance, but it also recognizes the need for more critical engagement and understanding of their political, social, and cultural implications. I don't know about you guys, I used to be an art student, before the biology and all that business and all this stuff, right? And it really, like, this really piques my interest. This really resonates with me. McCoy, in effect, preserves all of the temporalities in a single tweet and does what she can to ensure that all of those times of Black imagination continue on into the future. I have suggested that McCoy's tweet offers a starter kit for the budding Afrofuturist, and that her list would serve as the beginning of a syllabus for a college course. It is important to note that this idea that McCoy's tweet might generate a syllabus is more likely than not because as Afrofuturist literature and arts evolve and grow, more university courses devoted to them are being created. In many colleges and universities in the United States and internationally, Afrofuturism is studied as an artistic aesthetic, as a tool for critical cultural analysis, as a platform for analyzing the impact of modernization, of cultural production, and as an exploration of Black identity. Here is a tweet from an instructor at UCLA about her Afrofuturism class. The first two works I teach in my Afrofuturism class are W.E.B. Du Bois's short story, The Comet, and Octavia E. Butler's novel, Dawn. That's a good novel, too. Not my favorite from her, but that's a good novel, too. In the chat room, I see we got Sister Renee gracing us with her presence tonight. In the chat room, I think she say every night, though. I've read several Octavia Butler novels. They are amazing. The Parable series has been my favorite so far. I want to read all of her work. For you graphic novel, thank you, Sister Renee, for that comment. For you graphic novel fans out there, they did turn Kindred into a graphic novel. It's pretty good, too. The author of this tweet, Tanan Arrive, what a name, engages deeply with African and African-American fantasy, science fiction, and historical fiction in her scholarship. If you're listening live to the show, a thought just hit me. Can any one of you pull up a syllabus for an Afrofuturism course? It could be, from the US, the UK, the continent, anywhere. Can anyone pull up a syllabus in a PDF format for me? Post a link in the chat room. If you do find it, I'll click it and I'll try to display it in this conversation, so that we could go over, what makes up that Afrofuturist silhouette. The author of in her tweet, do make students, hers and others, and the broader public of Twitter users aware of a well-known, often taught Afrofuturist novel, Octavia Butler's Dawn, and helps them discover a story by an earlier, extremely famous African-American writer that only recently has been recognized as a work of Afrofuturism, W.E. Du Bois's The Comet. All right. First published in 1920. Dewes is putting Du Bois's story on her syllabus, and McCoy's, including Sojourner Truth's book in the previously discussed tweet, exemplify how texts from the Black literary past can be retroactively understood as Afrofuturist. Through her choice of these two works, Dew shows that Afrofuturism is not a narrow genre. By teaching The Comet, Dew shows students that Du Bois's interests stretch beyond sociology and social activism and encompass speculative genre fiction. It also foregrounds Du Bois's investment in envisioning a different future for Black people than what white society proposes for them. By teaching Dawn, Dew points out the radical hybridity of one of Afrofuturism's most important texts, In Dawn, Butler mixes science fiction, post-apocalyptic communities, relationships between humans and aliens, and queer sexualities. Dew and McCoy thus both offer an initiation into the Afrofuturist movement that encourages new followers to grasp the wide range of themes and genres that make up that movement. Dew's tweet may serve the students in her class, but it also makes the text on her syllabus accessible to users online who may not be familiar with Afrofuturism. And so if you guys can pull up Dew's syllabus online, that'll be great. Like McCoy, Dew uses Twitter as a platform to teach beyond the walls of the academy. In addition, Dew uses the spaces of the academy to platform Afrofuturism. During her tenure at Spelman College in Atlanta from 2012 to 2014, Dew pioneered the now annual festival Black to the Future, the Octavia E. Butler celebration of the fantastic arts, which honored the legacy of Octavia Butler. Dew invited established Afrofuturist writers such as Nalo Hopkinson, Cherie Renee Thomas, Nissi Shaw, Stephen Barnes, Brandon Massey, Jewel Gomez, and Samuel Delaney to speak at the event. So that's something for you guys to do. Look up these writers as well. You know, I have a suspicion some of them are probably intersectional, so you might have to, you know, deal with sort of sexuality type stuff. But you know, take a gander at it. You know, many Afrofuturist creators rely on the organizational labor of scholars such as Dew to increase their public visibility and reputation, strengthen their cultural legitimacy, and expose younger readers to their work. Dews and McCoy work on Twitter parallels the ongoing work they do to promote and support Afrofuturism in real-world spaces by organizing and leading live events, such as their coordination of festivals on college campuses and their teaching university courses, and by their growing the Afrofuturist network, such as bringing artists, novelists, and scholars to campuses and introducing them and their cultural productions to one another and to students. And, you know, to go back to what I was saying before, like, you know, we need doctors, lawyers, engineers, and whatnot, but we also need the artists. We need the creatives. We need the creatives. We need the people, like, you know, listen. When you go back and you look at like Steve Jobs and Wozniak and those guys, right, who developed the, you know, the tablets and whatnot that we have out here. You know, those guys were inspired by the Star Trek, the original series. You cannot put down inspiration. We can get across these ideas, these aspirations that we talk about. We can get them out there through creative works, through our art, you know, and by art I mean through music and whatnot, right? And in those different mediums, we have a good chance of grabbing the attention of people more than, say, through a textbook, right? Not that we don't need textbooks, we need those too. But I'm saying that we gotta push our messages in more than one style, through more than one type of medium. How dope would it be to be the author of a series of space exploration books? That becomes the thing that gives the impetus to a child in the future, maybe a child now or a child in the future, say in the continent or in the Caribbean or here in Black America, to develop, you know, the first, Space Institute. That's one of the things that they have planned for towards a better Africa, right? To start working on like space endeavors, right? You don't have to be some brilliant technician and inventor and all this stuff, but you can write through the pen or through your music or whatever, or both. You can inspire that kid. A lot of these white folks who do scientific stuff, like I said, they were inspired by things like Star Trek. They were inspired by H.G. Wells back in the day, right? When I was a kid, I used to read the book series such as the Hardy Boys and stuff. And there was a book series called Tom Swift. Tell me if you guys ever heard about Tom Swift before. Tom Swift, I think, was written by or published by the same people who published the Hardy Boys. Tom Swift was this like kid whose father was an inventor, because there's an original Tom Swift series from like the early 1900s. Tom Swift series that I grew up reading was more so from around 1965 to 1975. I read those in the 80s. And the series that I read was about the kid, the son of the original Tom Swift, doing all these fly-ass, space stories, these space adventures. And to this day, I can still remember the artwork on front of some of the books. It was these futuristic spacecraft, right? These space stations and spacecrafts and these spacesuits and all that stuff. Man, I'm telling you, a lot of white folks was inspired by that stuff. We need to be doing that for our own people, our own children, right? And again, this is stuff that we all could contribute to. You don't have to take it on by yourself and try to do it all by yourself, but get together in a group and sit down and write, start creating some writing prompts. And maybe as a collective, you could put together some work out there, get an artist involved. The next thing you know, you have something out there, something that can inspire our people in the future. That's something I'd like to see our people get more involved in. There's different ways to fight in the struggle. There's different jobs within building a nation. Find you a job. In the chat room, I see that Sister Renee says, Tanana Rive Du is a great science fiction writer too. She has a series about immortal Africa. Wow, immortal Africa. Wow, that's great. Can you post the name of that series? I'd like people who come across the podcast to be able to directly, go and find these works. Because and Sister Renee knows this already, but I like to have books. In fact, the truth of the matter is, I have too many books that I haven't been able to crack open yet. And I hope to be able to crack them open. But that's the thing, you have to have this hunger. If you're going to spend your money, man, why not a book? Right? Yeah. So this takes us to the section called Tapping into Afrofuturism's Creative Innovations, exploring the relationship between Afrofuturist arts and scholarship. Sharing the wealth of themes and elements regarding Afrofuturism likely proves valuable to Black academics, students, and social media followers. However, Afrofuturism also comprises multiple elements and themes not traditionally highlighted. Historically, scholars and cultural critics have focused on the aesthetic genres of Afrofuturism, such as the arts, painting, sculptures, photography, music, and literature as primary objects of study. Many scholars and cultural critics who have written about Afrofuturism have so far ignored the technology sector, leaving that sector's contributions understudied and undervalued. The tweet in figure 5.2 offers some insight as to how Afrofuturism motivated a tech entrepreneur. You see what I'm talking about? This is what I'm talking about. So let's go to figure 5.2. 5.2, figure 5.2 is a tweet from @Afrofuturism, linking to an article in the Root, on social entrepreneur Emily Camber. And the tweet says, a tech entrepreneur gets inspiration from hashtag Afrofuturism, right? And there's a picture, I guess, of the entrepreneur. And underneath it says, a tech entrepreneur gets inspiration from Afrofuturism. Emily Cambry is a social entrepreneur whose technology center, Chicago's Blue 1647, teaches people living in underserved communities how to code, make apps, ... Right? But that's what I'm saying. Like, we think about, you know, slightly more mundane things, you know, the textbooks, the books, like I said, textbooks and stuff like that. Well, in the case of Afrofuturism, many have just been looking at the paintings, the drawings, right? Sculptures, photography, music, right? And literature, right? Like we talk about Octavia Butler and others, right? But we're ignoring like the Afrofuturism in technology. You know, I talked to you guys about this. There was this magazine series. I'm not sure if it's still going. It's called Make Magazine. I have hundreds of them in PDF. I was a heavy reader of Make Magazine. Make Magazine, you know, promotes the idea of the maker space. The maker space is like a tech space. And you could go to cities all across America, for example, and even in Africa, and some parts of the Caribbean. And people have these maker spaces, these spaces where folks could come and tinker. They could come and create, you know, work on robots, work on code, use Legos to create structures. There's all sorts of stuff. And from that also came the kind of citizen science thing, where you got guys, you know, people doing biology, people doing genetics experiments at home, right? There's people who are cracking eggs open and developing an embryo in a plastic container, taking the contents of an egg, putting it at the right temperatures, creating code and gadgets to maintain the proper temperatures through the different phases of mitosis, etc., and actually hatching a chicken in a little plastic bag container. Right? And a lot of that comes from just these wild ideas, right? In literature, and how literature crosses over into like technology. You know, we got to do more of that. Recently, we saw the show on HBO, Lovecraft Country. I love the show Lovecraft Country, but when you look at the show, there's a black chick involved with it. For some reason, I can't remember her name right now. But again, she seems like an intersectionalist, so there's certain things you're going to see in it. But if you don't want to see certain things, then you got to be creating this stuff yourself. But tied to that show is also the guy from one of my favorite all-time shows, which is Lost, you know, J.J. Abrams. So if you're going to have guys like J.J. Abrams involved, expect there to be some white shit going on. If there's an intersectionalist black, expect there to be some other shit going on. But we can change that. We just need more voices doing it. And we have these platforms that we could really get the word out about what, the work that we're doing. In the chat room, Sister Renee says that this is the first book in Due's series, and she posts the link. Go click the link. My soul to keep by is the name of the book. My soul to keep by. All right. I appreciate that, Sister Renee. We gotta let people know. And that's the other thing too. Like, you can't, like, when it comes to creativity, you can't keep it to yourself. You cannot keep it to yourself. I don't care, how people might not receive it well or whatever. Trust me, inspiration comes in all kind of funny places. If you're out here making music and it doesn't sound like what's on the radio, but it's some down-to-earth, Afro-centered, Afrocentric, African-centered type stuff, put it out there for us to hear. Put it out there for us to engage with, whatever it is. All right? In this tweet, at Afrofuturism, links to an article to Root, a popular news blog about social entrepreneur Emile Cambry. Cambry founded a technology center called Blue 1647 in Chicago in 2011. Blue 1647 organizes and hosts classes in which people from underserved communities learn to code, make apps, and solve technical problems. I mean, isn't that what we need? And check the inspiration. Isn't that what we need, especially for our children to come up doing? And check the inspiration. Also, just quickly on that show that I just mentioned from HBO. Damn it, I just lost the name of the show. But that show I was talking about, Lovecraft Country, right? Lovecraft Country, not to talk about the story too much, but in the story, there's a young girl who's drawing these comics. Right? As I talk about this Blue 1647, the comic, I think the comic was called, what was the comic called? Not Atomic Blue, but something blue, I believe. Something blue. And lo and behold, it's a real black woman. Who's actually drawing this real comic book, and it looks fly as hell. Let me see if I can find this information real quick. I'm trying to find the name of the comic book in there, but I don't want the dead silence of me looking it up. If someone in the chat room knows what I'm talking about. Okay, here we go. Right, so comic book is in the show. It's called Orinthia Blue. Right, Orinthia Blue is the comic book in the show, right? And the author of that, the person who creates that comic book, the woman behind the Orinthia Blue comic book art, is a woman named Afua Richardson. Right? And perhaps that's another person we need to look up her works and support, right? Afua Richardson. All right. So yeah, I mean, we can't forget the arts. We can't forget to be creative in what we do. And so we need to make sure not to forget those things. But to continue with this paper and Emile Cambry. Cambry seeks to bring technological access to the residents of Chicago, specifically to neighborhoods that historically have lacked technological training and resources. He says, quote, too many times technology comes to the south and west sides of Chicago after it's been old. Cambry explains that Blue 1647 serves as an incubator and alternative learning and working space for adults and youth. The center's offerings and events include creating new Java files, coding and Minecraft game development, the Code Blue Hackathon series. This sounds real good. And the Reconnect Employment Assistance Program. This is work. This is work. Like I said, there's many ways to participate in this struggle. This is work. We could be creating our own video games and whatnot that has, that includes some of the aspirations that we have for Africa in the future, for African people. This is how you do work. This is the stuff I wish I was on to thinking about like 20 years ago. This is the stuff I wish I was really thinking about like 20 years ago. There's so much you can spawn out of this type of work that this person is doing. And remember what this person was inspired by. Afrofuturist narratives and artwork often depict Black people building communities, innovating new technologies, rewriting dominant narratives, and escaping oppression. Isn't that the kind of stuff you want your children engaging with? Reading those types of books, or looking at that type of artwork, or games, or TV shows. That's what you want. At Afrofuturism's tweet is no different. Characterizes Emile Cambry's project Blue 1647 as a technological revolution within a Chicago community, and explicitly links the project to Afrofuturism by using hashtag Afrofuturism in the tweet. Emile Cambry and Blue 1647 are not fictional or artistic constructs, but function in ways that actualize and embody Afrofuturistic ideas and themes. Not only does Cambry imagine the building of communities, but he also actualized his imaginings to some degree. It is notable, too, that where Cambry has founded his center in Chicago, a city rooted in violence, liberation struggles, blue-collar living, musical and visual artistic expression, in recent years, Chicago has seen an increase of work attached to the Afrofuturist movement, such as the Second City Comedy Club, Comedy with a Conscience, where this social and political venue combines the Black experience from a Black-centered science fiction stance using stand-up, sketch, music, and performance. I hadn't realized Second City was a Black thing. Another example of the Afrofuturist movement's presence in Chicago can be found in the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians, a nonprofit organization collective that comprises versatile and innovative musicians performing original creative music. In addition to their cutting-edge musicianship, AACM is also well known for their painted features and for costuming that adds a level of mysticism and fantasy to their multi-general jazz performances. A final example of the Afrofuturist movement in Chicago is exemplified in the Center for Afrofuturist Studies, CAS. CAS is an initiative to, quote, reimagine new futures for marginalized peoples by generating safe workspaces for artists of color. Through the Institute, artists from all backgrounds are able to serve as visiting artists or artists in residence and are able to construct imaginative and innovative work that addresses such topics as visibility of radicalized and gendered bodies in space, Afro-surrealism, myth-making, and the complexity of memory and ritual. KWAZ provides not only a safe space for artists, but also a venue for community engagement through their public lectures, workshops, and forums. Ultimately, at Afrofuturism's tweet is a celebration of Black uses and developments of technology, a promotion of Black media innovation, and a positive engagement with underserved but deserving communities. It promotes Afrofuturism as a vehicle for change, a tool for teaching and learning, and a method of community building. Afrofuturism is just another method, just another way of laying these blocks for community building. By the way, as I talk about Afrofuturism and stuff like that, shout out to MF Doom. That brother died. Apparently that brother died like 2 months ago, and it just was announced like today that he had died at the age of 49. In a reading of Afrofuturism, you'll see why, if you're familiar with MF Doom, you'll know why I kind of thought about him in that moment. Not just because the news dropped today, but because of what he was like in his visuals and his aesthetic, right? Tweets about Afrofuturism and real-world projects include reports about the relationship of Black women and girls to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. In 2004, on the campus of historically Black Spelman College, a group of young undergraduate Black women founded the Spellbots. This team of future Black women STEM leaders was created by Dr. Andrew Williams to encourage Spelman students to study robotics and mathematics. I've been talking to y'all about that in the past. In a short amount of time, the Spellbot team designed and built 8 four-legged robot soccer players to compete in the 2005 International RoboCup robot soccer competition, which made history by qualifying as the first all-Black undergraduate girls team to compete in this competition. The Spellbots group started as a way to encourage Spelman students to engage with humanoid robots, observe programming demonstrations, and obtain mentorship and guidance, but ultimately the group has become an important fixture at the Atlanta College. In the tweet in figure 5.3, at We Are Wakanda makes the Spelman technologists objects of attention of the interconnected social network of Twitter, promoting their accomplishments to users from both academia and the tech industry. At We Are Wakanda thus not only praises the efforts of these Black women, college students, but also depicts them as creators and inventors in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and math in the United States, which is significant given how often Black women have been excluded from STEM jobs and narratives about STEM innovation in the country. Let's go back up to the tweet in this chapter of the book. It says figure 5.3, a tweet from at We Are Wakanda, linking to an article celebrating the Spelman College Spellbots robotics team. The tweet says, Black women in robotics giving birth to the future. And it shows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 young Black women holding what looks like robots in their hands. You see? And again, this is where the curriculum comes in. In the sketch I have for the curriculum, coding, is a huge part of it, right? That's why I say you have to update these curriculum all the time, right? Coding is one of them. Robotics is one of the things as well. And this is where you got to start to put your money up. I was talking to a professor of robotics at a local college, and I was asking her, it was a white woman, and I was asking her for a syllabus. This was about 2 years ago, year and a half, 2 years ago, and she gave me all this rigmarole on how to get this syllabus. But I know the deal. I know why she didn't want to, give it to me. I was trying to get it for my kids, and my kids are still young, but I was trying to get it for them so I could start to piece together a plan for how to get them more invested in like this technology, coding and stuff like that, prototyping or whatnot. And she gave me the runaround for this syllabus. As a matter of fact, when I finally did get my hands on it, the syllabus was abstract as hell. Again, white folks do think in an abstract way, but it was abstract as hell where it almost wasn't much of a use. I think as it turns out, you have to really sit through her classes to get the understanding of how to use the syllabus, right? But again, what I'm saying is together, we can build a syllabus that teaches coding. These kids have all this, I put my kids onto this myself, got them books on it, coding in Scratch, coding in Python. How many of you have heard of coding in Scratch and coding in Python? How many of you have looked into coding for your kids as an option? Am I still live streaming? Seems so. Numbers of concurrent viewers really dropped for this live stream, boy. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, I still stand by what I'm talking about. In Afrofuturism, we need more people involved. By using the hashtag Afrofuturism hashtag, We Are Wakanda makes the spellbots a new object of Afrofuturist scholarship. We Are Wakanda simultaneously highlights the real-world technological manifestations of Afrofuturism and advances the ongoing conversation about the need for greater equity and inclusion of diverse races and genders in the tech field. Just as Afrofuturism frames Cambry as a leader in tech education for Black communities, We Are Wakanda draws attention to the Spellman roboticists as models for Black girls and women who might enter the field of tech, research, or production. Additionally, the work of the Spellbots team, in a way, continues a conversation from Donna J. Haraway's quote, to Cyborg Manifesto, regarding reconstructing the tools that women use, as well as their supposed natural role in society. Has anyone come across this work before, the Cyborg Manifesto? Although not identifying as cyborgs, women construct their own identities, capitalize on technological tools to create humanoid robots, and seize the opportunity to go beyond the expected possibilities of young Black women. Ultimately, in re-envisioning society, the spellbots highlight the technological aspect of Afrofuturism and serve as another example of how Afrofuturism is much more than science fiction and fantasy. The photo that We Are Wakanda tweets depicts the spellbot team holding their creations of robot babies, which indicates that Black women do not have to be mothers literally in order to be creators. They can choose to be engineers and investors of future technology. I like that. These young Black women are equipped with the tools to create and develop technological futures. Hence, We Are Wakanda's caption of the photo, giving birth to the future. As inventors of future technology, these students are afforded an opportunity of motherhood. Again, in this case, their progeny are robots, not humans, that historically was not granted or reduced to Black women. One is reminded of Hortense Spiller's assessment of the role of the Black female body in her 1987 essay, Mama's Baby, Papa's Maybe, an American grammar book. You know, I never read that book. Anyway, Spillers notes how black motherhood was historically sexualized, and how black womanhood in the Americas was long characterized by structural captivity and a reduction to property and flesh. Thus, at We Are Wakanda's provocative message that the Spelman students are giving birth to the future points to alternative modes of black women's creation and future making that diverge from the historical position of objection and victimization. The black woman in the Spelman team do not merely exist as flesh commodities, they also have the education and ingenuity to birth new technologies, thereby fostering the generation of new Afrofuturist stories. Thus, I Am Afrofuturisms and at We Are Wakanda's tweets made the case that the Afrofuturist conversation must go beyond the bounds of fiction to include real-world technologies. So this brings us to a section called the digital entrance of Afrofuturism. I want to take a second here to do a station ID break. I'll be back on the other side.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
And we're back. We had a section of the paper called The Digital Entrance of Afrofuturism. You guys hold on one second. Let me fix something real quick. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. I had to fix something real quick. I also want to say that in the Bitter Medicine WhatsApp group today, I posted a question about preschoolers, and I asked a question of, you know, what reading materials did you give your preschoolers? I think it's important we have those discussions as well. But what would you suggest? And I'm throwing this out there to you guys. What would you suggest as African-centered that our preschoolers, ages 3 to 5 or whatever, should be reading or have read to them, as a part of their education? And this is where Afrofuturism comes in as well, right? There's things that from this genre of the Black experience, right, we can give to them as well, right, and start them off right. So what books would you suggest? Since we're talking Afrofuturism, what book or art or what have you, or technology, or what do you think we should put before our preschoolers, right, to start to prepare them for the future, to continue the digital entrance of hashtag Afrofuturism. Before the hashtag Afrofuturism tag was launched on Twitter, Afrofuturism gave rise to a robust early online community. In 1998, sociologist Alondra Nelson and multimedia artist Paul D. Miller, also known as DJ Spooky, created the Afrofuturist listserv, whose numerous subscribers include scholars, authors, musicians, and artists. Well, I wonder if that listserv is still around. Then in 2000, Nelson and Miller launched the website www.afrofuturism.net. Both Nelson's and Miller's online communities laid the foundation for their editing a special issue of the academic journal Social Texts on Afrofuturism in 2002. However, the activity on Nelson and Miller's listserv began to decline in the early 2000s, and for several years, Afrofuturists did not have an internet platform on which they could communicate routinely about their research and productions. Therefore, I consider 2002 to 2011 to be a dormant period for internet-based Afrofuturism. In 2011, however, Afrofuturism was officially reintroduced to the digital network space in the form of a hashtag. The tweet below from @FugitivePhilo was the first to use the tag Afrofuturism and gestures to how that movement blends issues of gender, race, sexism, and black humor. Hashtag XLR8 on hashtag Angela Davis and hashtag DJ Venus, black humor and sexism hit a new low, question mark. And in quotes it says, and yes, the quotes are BS. And then it gives the website, etc. Since @FugitivePhilo posted this first Afrofuturism tweet, the tag hashtag Afrofuturism has become a social media conversation thread in a way to amplify and express concerns about blackness and technology, and a space in which experts in and novices of black speculative genres can come together and form a community. Not only does this tweet mark an official social media entrance, but it also becomes attached to an April Fool's joke gone by. The day before, on April 1st, this tweet came into existence. Accelerate blindly entered into a Twitter feud with queer Latina DJ Venus by GG and an infamous producer known for his cultural appropriation antics named DJ Diplo. In short, the feud circles around problematic issues of imperialism, white male privilege, and sexism mixed with musical appropriation. The tweet becomes even more problematic when Angela Davis is inadvertently inserted into the feud. Although confusing upon first read, when all the details are explained, the tweet becomes more clear. In essence, @FugitivePhilo is sparking a discussion that is very familiar within Afrofuturism. The misplacement and trivialization of black women and other women of color, even in the social media landscape, must be examined, revised, and rewritten. Historically, U.S. academia is not always receptive to black and African diasporic studies, such as Afrofuturism. Thus, Twitter and hashtag Afrofuturism have become an alternative discussion site with a wide reach. Scholars, critics, students, artists, musicians, STEM workers, and others who are doing work on blackness and technology, social justice and black futures, and black fantasy are afforded a welcoming space to share their work on Afrofuturism. Scholars within African American, African diaspora, Black studies frequently share news about academic conference, symposia, and colloquia in the hashtag Afrofuturism tag, and are thereby using Twitter to create and foster Afrofuturist academic communities. Through hashtag Afrofuturism, the dissemination of Afrofuturist scholarship evolves and expands, and research opportunities are announced and spread. An example of how Afrofuturist scholars network and share news from conferences in the hashtag Afrofuturism tag can be found in this tweet. It says, Yazek looking at covers of amazing stories next to covers of the Crisis magazine, hashtag Afrofuturism Symposium at CAU. Here, Britt Russert, assistant professor in the W.E.B. Du Bois Department of Afro-American Studies at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, tweets about her experience at the 2016 Clark Atlanta University Afrofuturism Symposium. Through this tweet, Russert reports on how fellow Afrofuturist scholar Lisa Yazek, in a talk at the conference, drew parallels between the covers of African-American science fiction magazine Amazing Stories and the influential The Crisis, the official magazine of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. That's something to look into. Whose founder and first editor was another Afrofuturist, W.E.B. Du Bois. Before this reading, have you guys ever associated W.E.B. Du Bois as an Afrofuturist? Like, have you ever thought of him in that light? Again, the importance of these readings is to open our minds to other thoughts, right? You know, typically I think of W.E.B. Du Bois as a sociologist and somewhat of a sellout, but, you know, you could look at him as an Afrofuturist as well, it seems. By bringing these publications into conversation with each other, Yazek employs a common Afrofuturist method of foregrounding the relationship between history, nonfiction, and science fiction, that is, between the real past and the imagined future. Russert's tweet, referencing Yazek, The Crisis, and Amazing Stories, thus executes a threefold agenda. It increases awareness of historical media from the Black community. It acknowledges historical texts as part of the lineage of Afrofuturism, and it showcases how Afrofuturist academics network with one another and learn from each other's work at academic symposia and conferences. Here's another academic tweet in hashtag Afrofuturism that connects the African American past to a possible future. Hashtag Mississippi was a giant gulag for hashtag Black people. That's why they shouted for hashtag Black Power, hashtag Afrofuturism, hashtag Planet Deep South, JSU. At Hardcore88 is a Twitter pseudonym of Reynaldo Anderson, Associate Professor of Communication at Harris Stowe University. Anderson tweeted this during the Planet Deep South Colloquium, Speculative Cultural Production at Africanisms in the American Black South, which took place in February 2006 at Jackson State University, and his tweet suggests a linkage between Southern Black identity, the 1960s Black Power movement, historical slavery, and Afrofuturism. Anderson represents Mississippi, where Planet Deep South was held, as a gulag, which is a Soviet term for a forcible labor camp. That's why they shouted for Black Power, is a reference to how Black people in Mississippi fought for their civil rights in the 20th century through such efforts as the Freedom Riders and the desegregation of the University of Mississippi. By tying in this sequence with Afrofuturism as a hashtag, Anderson shows the movement of African Americans from enslavement to fighting for their civil rights to a future that is undefined but will be grounded in Black liberation. Because Anderson's tweet turns Mississippi from a rural agrarian state haunted by a past of brutal slavery into a launching pad of radical new imaginative thinking about the future of Black America. Anderson's tweet also illustrates the multiple temporalities of Afrofuturism. His tweets create lightning-fast connections between himself other colloquium attendees, and people who could not attend the live event, and also underscore the long history and durability of Black Power. Afrofuturism tweets at conferences and colloquia also serve as back channel conversations. Not only are Rousset and Anderson physically present at their respective events, but they also expand the conversations taking place at those live events by participating with audiences online through their tweets. The fact that numerous online users interact with scholars at academic conferences on Afrofuturism confirms a growing interest and investment in Afrofuturism. These off and online conversations within the larger Afrofuturist community also qualify as a form of networking through which members of that community become familiar with one another's work, which can lead to future citations, invitations to perform or speak, and mentoring relationships. So this brings us to a part of the paper called Eliminating the Borders and Creating New Spaces, Broadening the Geographical Boundaries of the Afrofuturism Movement. If you're new here, let me take a moment to say, if you're new to the podcast, by all means, please hit the like button, subscribe, and click the bell so that you can be notified of future episodes whenever I'm on live or upload new content. Again, this episode is representative of the 6th day of KWAZ, Kuumba, where we talk about creativity. As many of you know, those of you who are regulars, I've done an episode each night representing a principle per day of Kwanzaa. Tonight is what we call Old Year's night. Tomorrow's New Year's. So I'll be on again tomorrow night as well, finishing out my Kwanzaa week of episodes, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this. You know, I do it for you as much as I do it for myself. This topic of Afrofuturism is a good one. When you retweet this episode or post it on your social media, please use the hashtag Afrofuturism. All right. Shout out to those of you who are live with me. Shout out to Sister Renee, who was active in the chat room. Let's continue. Afrofuturism as a movement is ascendant outside of the arts and humanities. In this section, I will illustrate the connections between Afrofuturism and social justice. The following tweets discuss 3 metropolitan cities with significant Black populations and how organizers and activists there draw on the themes and imaginaries of Afrofuturism to find hope and healing, to rebuild communities, and to seek justice. The first tweet, in figure 5.4, brings attention to Detroit's past and future. Let me just go to the tweet. So figure 5.4, a tweet from I Afrofuturism, bringing attention to an article addressing the city of Detroit's past and future. The tweet says the future was already here. Hashtag Detroit's Afrofuturist enclaves, from Detroit Metro Times. Right, the future was already here. Detroit's Afrofuturist enclave. This architecture cannot be subjected to any law of historical continuity. It must be new, just as our state of mind is new. And that's from Juan Antonio. In this tweet, at I Afrofuturism says, quote, the future is here, implying that Detroit is very much familiar with the future. The city of Detroit acts as a kind of time machine in that it has always been a site rich with ideas about Black futurism and different eras of Detroit's history have proposed different futures. For example, in June 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave a speech in Detroit at Cobo Hall, now known as Cobo Center, titled The Great March in Detroit, which served as a dry run for his famous I Have a Dream speech, which he gave just 2 months later. Several passages appear in both speeches. King's overall message in his Detroit speech was that it was urgent and important to continue the civil rights movement's forward momentum. King emphasized that Detroit, and later Washington, D.C., and the entire nation had to be future-oriented with respect to racial equality. And Detroit was the first place to be hailed in King's vision of the future. Detroit was also strongly associated with with futurism through its being the site of the first black-owned record label, Motown, and by having the status throughout much of the 20th century as the world's automotive center. Afrofuturism may have had a long history in Detroit, but since the decline of the U.S. auto manufacturing industry, Detroit has had to redefine its future. According to Aaron Robertson, author of the MetroTimes.com article linked to in at Afrofuturism Suite, quote, often the work of Afrofuturists, whether they are artists or engineers, is performed in a metaphorical underground. It tries to make abstract and material technologies relevant by giving blacks opportunities to understand, use, critique, resist, and design them. It reimagines technological processes and the economic and political systems that create them. That was Robertson in 2016. Robertson argues that Detroit can possibly imagine a new future for itself using the lenses of Afrofuturism. One example of Detroit residents' efforts to reimagine their city is the ONE, the Oakland North End Mile Project, a collaborative community development effort that works to uplift Detroit's Oakland Avenue and North End neighborhoods through cultural production and neo-economic activity. This is done through the promotion of local North End businesses, a community garden, and arts program, seasonal musical performances showcasing North End talent, and the launching of its corresponding magazine of the same name. Similar to Emile Cambry's Blue 1647 Center in Chicago, the ONE Mile Project is creating a network of people who seek to redefine and redesign the technical and cultural legacy of Detroit. Through local businesses, artists, and residents, past and present, sharing their stories or experiences, new ideas, and resources, Oakland North End benefits from the revenue and is able to build more networks and cultivate more public spaces into this one abandoned community. A community rich in history is able to maintain its nostalgia while also creating a future sustainable environment. The ONE Mile Project is meant to catapult projects and programs that create new avenues of production, whether technically or culturally, while also sparking present and future conversations and updating past ones. This redefinition allows the people to question the possibilities of or even resist the system that house built-in exclusions, thus finding other ways to survive and thrive. Robertson and other residents see Detroit as a place of forward-moving transition. Although at Afrofuturism's tweet depicts Detroit as clearly futuristic, it makes clear that this futurism also has had severe consequences by including the phrase hashtag Detroit's Afrofuturist enclaves. This phrase potentially invites discussion of Detroit as a modern-day dystopia, Since the late 20th century, Detroit has suffered from economic devastation, gentrification, and generational institutionalized oppression. In a way, Afrofuturism calls for an understanding of Detroit as not just a city, but also a character in a story of hope and survival against desperate odds. However, despite calling attention to the historical and emotional horrors suffered by Detroit's residents, Afrofuturism also frames Detroit as a city of reincarnation and renaissance by linking to Roberts' article on the 1 Mile Project. While the tweet is not specifically making its own argument, what is notable is that it references legacy media reportedly on Afrofuturism and points to longer stories about Afrofuturism. Another tweet from the United States Department of Arts and Culture, USDAC, offers an informational bridge that incorporates art, community engagement, and Afrofuturism, while simultaneously demonstrating the need to rebuild and maintain the community and a sense of Black political, social, and cultural identity for the Black residents within the North Philadelphia neighborhood of Charleswood, Bloomberg. The USDAC, which is a non-governmental organization, an NGO, acts as a nationwide grassroots network that actively seeks change and promotes programs and organizations that focus on creativity. Philadelphia, like Detroit, is a city struggling with redevelopment and fighting various issues threatening minority communities, including displacement and gentrification. Thus, USDAC on the local level works as a partnership that supports communities like the Sherwood Bloomberg neighborhood to help support the articulation of their cultural needs and imagining their own futures. According to Rashida Phillips, pictured in the tweet in figure 5.5, an Afrofuturist artist, author, and attorney for the Landlord-Tenant Housing Unit of Community Legal Services, practices such as digital design brunches, yoga classes, and housing resources workshops help to preserve the Charleswood Bloomberg neighborhood. Phillips calls these practices Afrofuturist because they serve as a safe space for the residents to share their memories, hopes, and dreams for their rapidly changing community through various visual, vocal, written, and physical mediums. And that's what I'm saying. Like, we get bogged down often in this so-called conscious community. We get bogged down with this one medium, like like one or two. Like nowadays, it's the DVD, it's the book. That's what I'm saying is the contents of these things tend to be tend to be kind of heavy, which is fine. But if you want to reach more people, there's other means to reach people, right? And the idea that we unify too around our shared memories, our shared hopes, our shared dreams, using the visual, the vocal, the written, and the physical medium. That's where we need to focus on next. We've always kind of done it, as this article has suggested, with the Motowns and Afrofuturism and music and stuff like that. But we need to weave them together better. If who's listening still, who follows what I'm saying, we need to weave these things better. I remember, Eddie Murphy one time talking about if he came back to stand-up comedy, it wouldn't just be comedy anymore. There'll be music in it. Because, Eddie is a big time fan of music. He's a musician himself. And, he wanted to blend it. And funny enough, right after he said it, Cedric the Entertainer, who's not as funny as Eddie Murphy, of course, but he started doing these comedy specials that included song and dance and all kinds of stuff. As a matter of fact, he at one time got a show where he was doing like a talent show, was mixed with, you know, stand-up comedy, dance, music and stuff like that. It didn't last long, but what I'm saying is, I think there's a way that we can take, yeah, and in fact, KWAZ radio kind of shows that, right? You have a guy like Only Time Say with the pro-black perspective. You have me, you know, somewhere in the middle, and then you have like the Harsh Reality podcast, which is a fun podcast talking about current events, you know, in a real fly way. Then you have like, you know, the Queen's Council. So I think there's a way we could bring all these things together. We have guys like, you know, Arthur Zor out here making music. There's got to be a way to bring like the message of, say, his music, the message of the pro-black perspective, what I do with the Harsh Reality podcast does, and start to mesh these things in a way where you get more people interacting with the central message, right? That's the ultimate point that I'm trying to come to. So in this figure 5.5, a tweet from the USDAC exploring an informational bridge that incorporates art, community engagement, and Afrofuturism in North Philadelphia. The tweet itself says #Afrofuturism, art and fighting displacement and gentrification in Philly, in #Philly. And the article is about race against time. A North Philly artist aims to document her disappearing ... In the summer of 2015, the city launched a $560 million redevelopment project in North Philadelphia's Sharswood, Blumberg neighborhood and forced more than ... Right, so, you know, it cuts off. You can't see all of it. Where was I? Another example of an Afrofuturist community effort in Philadelphia is the Community Futures Lab, CFL, which is a workshop space, gallery, studio, think tank, and resource library, also located in the Sharswood, Blumberg neighborhood. CFL was created in response to a $526 million redevelopment project that began in the summer of 2015 and forced more than 500 families out of their homes in Philadelphia, claiming eminent domain. As an Afrofuturist project, CFL becomes a place to heal some of the wounds and pain caused by the housing instability. Historically, Afrofuturism has always been seen as a liberating practice for Black people within the African diaspora, as they are able to use the fantasy, science fiction, and Afrocentrism to not only preserve the existing cultural legacy, but also to reimagine and recreate Black futures. Much like the Blue 1647 and the ONE Mile Project, the CFL works to ensure that the local community does not have to be dependent on larger corporations, that it invokes a sense of pride and empowerment, and most importantly, that the local residents personally reap the benefits and play a significant role in its present and future developments. According to Phillips, quote, the Afrofuturist landscape lends itself well to exploring notions of institutional liberation, unearthing our true histories, mapping our futures, understanding our present conditions in the flow of time, and through a speculative lens, end of quote. This Afrofuturist landscape can be seen as a redevelopment and reclamation project for the residents of the Sharswood Bloomberg neighborhood. Although the neighborhood is making a transition to becoming, quote, the gallery at Market East, end quote, the CFL and the Black Quantum Futurism Collective still seek to uphold an Afrofuturist landscape within the community so that a part of the community and its residents still remains regardless of the gentrification. Thus, according to Phillips, the CFL has become a site of institutional liberation by the way it functions as a living gallery. With all the stories collected, materials, images, essays, and interviews, the community residents and non-residents are able to see their own experiences reflected and acknowledged while also learning about another person's journey. This collective memory also has become important as an archive in that Phillips has been able to capture the such materials to create BQF Theory and Practice Volume 2, Community Futurism, a follow-up to her original anthology, Black Quantum Futurism, Theory Practice Volume 1. Okay, something to check out. The US Art Department tweet about Afrofuturism in Philadelphia, together with the tweets about Afrofuturism at work in Chicago and Detroit, showcase Afrofuturism's relevance and importance to Black urban community projects. This brings us to a section called I Continue to See a Black Future in Afrofuturism. For each of these cities, Chicago, Detroit, and Philadelphia, Afrofuturism is rooted in the Black people who have inhabited the space in the past and present and who seek better futures for themselves on their own terms. Ultimately, Afrofuturism as a movement and a tool for freedom, self-determinism, and equality is hopeful in that it looks to overcome the ways that society remains unequal. The creative methods discussed in each of the tweets presented in this chapter are descriptions for a promising future. Although Afrofuturism is often about literary fiction with regard to technologized Black futures or Black musical artists working with advanced sound technologies, the incorporation of Twitter affords a new arena for interrogating and exploring additional conversations. This chapter has shown that as hashtag Afrofuturism circulates through Twitter, it also encompasses Black students and workers engaging with and making digital technologies. Through Twitter, Black scholars are also connecting with one another at academic events, and Black communities are using a wide range of ideas and grassroots practices that help imagine new futures for themselves in response to or defiance of structural, economic, and social inequalities. According to graphic artist John Jennings, quote, Afrofuturism is not science fiction, but about imagining different spaces of creative thought that doesn't put your identity in a box, end of quote. All in all, this box that Jennings speaks of is a constant battle that Afrofuturists continuously fight to not become trapped by or in. From the examples and conversations put forth here, Afrofuturism proves to be a convincing identity, network, safe space, and artistic expression that dismantles the box and opens up a plethora of imaginary spaces of creative thought. And that's the end of the paper. Doesn't seem like there's any more interaction in the chat room besides Sister Renee, but I'd like to say that if you are familiar with Afro-futuristic works in any medium, from the UK, from the US, from the Caribbean, from South America, from the continent itself, I'd like you guys to tag me in it, or tag me in a tweet, or what have you, or email me directly, or text me at the number that you see in the upper left-hand corner. Let me know what I should be on to, right? Let me know what I should be up on, right? That'll be a good thing. And in this new year, I'd like to hear from you guys who have taken up the call to create more literature or technology or music or what have you that could be considered Afro-futurists. I'd like you guys to reach out to me and let me know what you're doing. I would love to spotlight people who I'm connected to through this show, through this medium, right? If you have a play or short story or something of that matter that you like to create an audio version of, talk to me about it. Maybe I could be of some help. We could put out more artistic works in audio format. I'm talking about something fly too, by the way. I'm talking about like the old audio works I used to listen to growing up on the radio, right? Fly stuff with all the effects and all the sounds that needs to make the story work, with different people playing different characters. And that's something we can do. Will you answer that call? In any event, since there's no more interaction in the chat room, I hope you guys enjoyed this paper. I hope you guys enjoyed this topic. I hope you guys enjoyed what we've done here on the podcast this year. This year was a bounce back year from not really podcasting, creating new content last year for some personal reasons. But I hope you guys enjoyed everything, including this week of Kwanzaa and what we discussed. We have one more day left in Kwanzaa. That's to start the new year. And I think it's cool to, also start the new year off with a new broadcast. So tomorrow night, you can expect us to be talking about the final principle, something that's within the final principle of Kwanzaa. Anyway, guys, I'm not going to belabor this any further. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you give me a thumbs up. Make sure subscribe, click the bell. And until tomorrow night, which is next time, peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.